Thanks so much for inviting me here, and I'm happy to be talking to you guys. This is about my forthcoming book, which is going to be coming out with MIT Press probably at the end of next year. I would say about a year, but who knows with publishing timelines. So I'll talk a little bit about myself and how I got into this project, and then I'm going to dive right in because it's a short period of time to talk about a very long project. So my research is on India's used electronics economies. It is usually referred to as an e-waste industry, and I'm going to make it clear to you why I focused on used electronics rather than e-waste. This started with an interest in waste myself. I used to work for the Department of Sanitation in New York for a while. I've been working on waste for ages, and so before I did my PhD, I'd already had this kind of focus on materiality and things and what comes of them and the many different lives and afterlives of things. And this has now morphed into a study of repair, particularly because looking at electronics and electronic waste is a particularly rich waste stream. So while most of us use and depend on these electronics constantly, I'm going to use this to keep track of how long I'm talking, we rarely see the labor that goes into making, selling, and repairing them. And so this is part of this reframing waste as value through reuse and repair, as opposed to thinking about electronic devices once we discard them as just purely waste. So my research steps behind the veil, so to speak, to look at India's diverse used electronics industry. From observations of this industry, I draw conclusions about how centering reuse and repair, rather than thinking about these things once we dispose of them as waste, and that thinking about this helps us to better understand our relationships to commodities and wealth under late capitalism, and the social and environmental consequences of these relationships to things and our common relationship to them, which is to dispose of them. So, a preview of what e-waste is. This is a lovely pile of circuit boards that I took a photo of while I was doing my research. It is a growing waste stream. It's become really notorious worldwide as a hazardous waste and a global environmental justice. This is probably how most people have come to understand e-waste. This is how it gets talked about in popular media exposés, which I'll talk about in a second. And the narrative is generally about dumping e-waste in the global south. So you can see here that e-waste is growing substantially, going from 53.6 million metric tons in 2019 to a predicted rise to 82 million metric tons. And it's rising 5 times faster than documented e-waste recycling. So it's become this huge concern about mountains of accumulating waste. This gets talked about in popular media along these lines. You can just see some of the language that's being used: graveyard, hellscape, death, victim, crime, etc. The narrative is that this waste is hazardous. It does have a lot of hazardous chemicals, including lead, which I'll talk about a bit later, in old computer monitors and TVs. And so it's become focused on as a major concern about what to do with these rising piles of e-waste, right? And so the main focus has been this idea that people in the global north are dumping e-waste into the global south for informal management. This has been debunked. Statistically, this isn't actually true, but if you're interested in that research, you can read Josh Lepowski's work. It's fantastic on how a lot of e-waste is actually moving within regions rather than from global north to global south, and that actually the valuable stuff ends up going to the global north to be recycled for gold recovery. But needless to say, we have this narrative which is talking to us about the sort of fears of this global graveyard, right, and victimization. This has been then reframed as the urban mine. So the urban mine is showing us all of the different electronics that we have in our house. If you're lucky enough to have a house with a scullery and a garden and a garage, etc., a work and hobby room. This is a big house, but the point is there are collected amassments of electronics that we all have, right? And the point of this reframing it as an urban mine is to get us to think about e-waste as actually a source of value. So in each mobile phone, you have about $1 worth of gold in it, in the circuit boards, right? So these are actually very valuable devices. It's not the same as recycling paper or something like that, which does have a market and is valuable on the recycling market, but it's not quite the same as gold. So this urban mine has been framed as a way of taking environmental concerns about the growing electronic waste and coming up with a tidy answer to what to do with all of this waste, that we will recycle everything and it will reduce our dependence on virgin materials for commodity production. This is also attempting to find a solution to these concerns about e-waste in the global south, because the predominant model for this is that e-waste would be collected and then dealt with in the global north, and the recycling as well as the wealth would stay in the global north. So my research began as a response to these understandings of waste by examining e-waste as part of an extended, often global electronics economy, existing in the midst of electronics production and not at the end, so not thinking of this as an easy line where you're just disposing of things at the end. Against the common discourse on informal e-waste recycling labor in India as crude, hazardous, and locally polluting, I begin from the premise that India's used electronics industries are intimately connected to global commodity circuits and technology industries, not separate and backward industries. So this view of e-waste from the repair shop and even the scrap shop, rather than a recycling factory, offers a very different rendition of e-waste, and particularly informal e-waste in the global south, rather than what is presented in policy and popular media, like those images before. Building on scholarship on vibrant waste economies, I demonstrate that India's electronics waste sector is in fact a powerful source of value and product creation, and call into question e-waste as a definitive waste product and its management in a waste economy. I will go really quickly into my methodology. I did a little bit under 2 years of ethnographic research in Delhi and some surrounding areas in India. I call this a patchwork ethnography because it's capturing different areas of work processes, and local networks. This image here is of Nehru Place, which is a major electronics market in Delhi, which has, as you can see in the photo, both the Dell exclusive store and then also mobile repair, laptop repair next to it. So it's got this mix of new electronics being sold as well as electronics being repaired. And I talked to repairers and traders of all scales, from new and used parks, both informal and formal, waste collectors at all different scales, repairers, IT maintenance workers, used computer salespeople, reassembly factory workers. I talked to people across all of the different parts of this industry, mainly participant observation and unstructured interviews. So, my research shows the problems with understanding waste as an easily defined object of study. So as I show in this diagram here, the value of a thing is much more flexible, and it moves between different positions within our own livelihood. So it has many lives. I made these lines dotted because it can essentially move back and forth between repair, resale, reassembly, and it could become e-waste, then go back into resale, et cetera, et cetera. So as I show throughout my book, informal and secondhand electronics economies understand things outside of commonly sacrosanct and rigid categories, such as new and old, or working and non-working, to try to explore relationships with things beyond their initial use and exchange value. The main commonality bringing repairers together is that they see the potential for things to be something beyond what commodity capitalism has made them, and then what their original use has ended, right? This is very common in India in the sense that there's still a vibrant repair economy for a lot of different things. You can, there are people who will go around and basically fix your pressure cooker. They like bang out little dents in it. There's a lot, it's very easy. I once had I've had a lot of things repaired. My microwave exploded while I was living in Delhi, and they were just like, it's just a wire that's broken. If my microwave exploded in London, I would not have like brought it in for repair. It wouldn't have cost me a few pounds. It would have been like a really intense thing, right? But I also want to foreground that I don't think that this is just something that's like an old system that we've just moved beyond. It's usually conceived of as traditional, but I would want to reframe it as a lifestyle that's in general more attuned to things in the world around us, as well as based on an economy that is more driven by often need, or the need to repair things, right? And we're mostly living in a society where we can very easily throw things away. So I'm going to talk a little bit about these 3 different aspects of the repair economy. So these are things that I think the average person frames as kind of being all the same, but when you're actually in the industry, they're very different, and I think it's important to point out their differences and what they bring to the table. The first one that I'm going to talk about is, so repair and maintenance, resale and refurbishment, and reassembling and remanufacturing also seem to operate at different scales. So I think when we think of repair, we usually think of, we have a broken screen or something, and we bring it to an individual repair person, and that individual repair person fixes it. And that would generally, I think, have little economic impact, although I also have research on repair in London that is arguing it is actually quite impactful, even those individual repairs. But it is also something that does not just happen with individual things, it's something that can be happening at larger scales. The importance of this work, I think, is that it attends to the individual things with hands-on attention. You have to actually pay attention to the thing that was broken, and you have to pay attention to how it broke, how it was used, the relationship with the person who is using it, and it considers the commodity as part of these wider systems of use rather than as something that is just in need of being discarded. In this photo, this is actually a sort of larger scale repair that's happening where keyboards who had lost keys are being repaired with other keyboards. So it's basically something where this is actually like a factory that's repairing keyboards. The larger bulk perspective is thinking about resale and refurbishment. So this is, in this photo, a bunch of bulk desktop computers that had been discarded by a large company who was deciding to upgrade their computers. It's common to upgrade your computers every 3 years if you're in corporate companies. So you'll notice that all of these are exactly the same, like they're the same size, they have the same specifications. And so this can happen on a really large scale where you have a process of upgradation and resale of electronics. So you have another company who wants to buy bulk computers but doesn't want to buy bulk new computers. And so then they're able to buy these bulk computers from a resale or refurbishment company. And the last example I want to talk about is remanufacturing. So this is an image of a factory that I was actually able to follow all the different threads of this process. It's turning CRT computer monitors into CRT TVs. For the younger people in the room, a CRT TV and computer monitor are the really big, bulky computers and TVs that weighed a lot that we have phased out for our lovely flat screens, right? These are a really big concern in recycling circles because the glass is leaded glass. And so the recycling of these things is a really big concern. And so this is a significant deferment of one of the most sort of controversial electronic waste. So it's a deferment of waste as they're turned into new TVs. And they're made into smart TVs. So what you're seeing on the left here, actually, and the bottom, is that they're making circuit boards for these TVs. They'll have USB connectivity, they'll have Wi-Fi connectivity, they'll have new speakers, they will have new plastic, at the top, it's a little bit hard for you to see, but it's the plastic casing, which is made out of recycled plastic, but it's a new casing designed for these TVs. And so people will be able to buy these TVs as a new TV with new TV capabilities, but based on used materials. I saw a lot of these types of things where you would have new products made with old materials. You could have like a battery pack for recharging your smartphone or something made out of laptop batteries, reused laptop batteries. So these are significant ways in which things re-enter reuse economies in India. So I'm going to hopefully start my conclusion and think about the circular economy. So drawing from insights gleaned from observing repair work in action for several years, I want to zoom out and think about what this means for thinking about production, consumption, and disposal practices more broadly. So what we're looking at here are 3 different conceptions of a production economy. We can think this random British waste business for this lovely diagram. But I think it's quite useful. It's an oversimplification. It keeps them having very small steps. But the linear economy is the economy that we would sort of be accustomed to, the idea that you just take raw materials, produce things, consume things, and then dispose of things, right? I will set aside the reuse economy for now. That's what I'll be talking about more in the final conclusion, and look at the circular economy. So the circular economy is responding to the linear economy, and it's essentially trying to recognize the fact that the linear economy is really problematic environmentally. It depends on virgin materials, and it depends on a process where you're just wasting things at the end. It's imagined as enabling production processes to continue, but with low waste material inputs and basically recycled and reused materials rather than depending entirely on raw materials. This is also where important concepts like planned obsolescence come in, because what I want to point out is that this is in service of what I would describe as a different cycle, which is a common cycle of production, consumption, and disposal, which depends on the constant use and disposal of things so that we buy more things. This is founded in a continuous need for growth in cycles of production, consumption, and disposal. So you have that things are designed to break or be replaced, then they are manufactured, they are sold. We are encouraged to replace these new things either because they broke or because they are not trendy anymore. We dispose or recycle them, and then the process continues. And so it is a cycle that is what commodity capitalism is dependent on. This is just a basic economic fact. You need to continue to sell things in order to have economic growth, right? So thinking about I'll go back to the circular economy. Thinking about the circular economy and its normal framing as a critique of the linear economy, I think is quite problematic, because I think both of these are grounded in the assumption of commodity capital, in which you have to continue to have cycles of production, consumption, and disposal for economic growth, and that that is based on a speeding up of that process. And there's an underlying need to continually sell things, but the circular economy proposes that you will sell things that are recyclable or repairable and are made out of recyclable materials. And I would argue that because of this, the circular economy is fundamentally a form of business as usual for commodity capital. So I want us to think at the end about what it would be to consider a reuse-based circular economy. This would be essentially a non-capitalist circular economy. This follows from Marx's understanding of economic systems as producing different types of social relations. So what would it mean to relate to our things differently under that, like, divorced or outside of our dominant mode of production that we are currently predominantly embedded in. So this is a system we're currently in right now that's dependent on producing waste and the continuation devaluation of things for the self-perpetuation of capitalist cycles of value and profit. And so a non-circular or a non-capitalist circular economy, or a reuse-based circular economy, would be premised on a different mode of relating to things, a different type of social relations, because repair essentially disrupts timescales of commodity production. It allows us to slow down and more easily relate to the things in our lives, and that includes repairing for them and caring for them. I also think that this is significant because it revalues labor that is doing significant environmental work but is often not given attention. This goes back to my original point about how e-waste, particularly in the Global South, is always framed as this hazardous thing. And so there's actually an entire economy of people who are working on this, who are doing actual significant environmental work by deferring waste, who are often not given any value. And so in conclusion, I think that zooming out even more from my research, I think that my sort of key arguments are that we need to recognize the significance of repair work, that this often happens behind the scenes, but it's vital for everything that we do every day. I mean, it happens literally all the time. It happens in our classrooms, it happens on our streets, et cetera, but it's just, if it works, we just don't see it. I also want to argue against a productivist bias, which focuses on creativity and inventiveness and invention being in the production of things rather than in the potential for reinventing things. I also want to point out the fluid movement between waste and value, and that this is This leads us to think about things as processes of wasting. How do we end up with so much waste in the first place? And to think more critically about processes of planned obsolescence and how how our social relationships are bound up in this process of commodity disposal. And finally, to think about this as something to think about as a call for a different kind of sustainability, that a reuse-based circular economy is getting us to think beyond a business-as-usual form of weak sustainability, but a real intervention into urban sustainability. Thank you.